All right, real talk for a second before we get into anything else. Today was the kind of day Raider Nation has been waiting on since the moment last season ended in disappointment. Pads weren't on yet, nobody was getting hit, but if you were paying attention, you could feel it. Something shifted today. The energy at that practice field was different, and I need to walk you through exactly why because there's a lot to unpack. Training camp officially opened, and for the first time since the calendar flipped, we got actual eyes on this roster as a full unit. Not highlight reels, not off-season hype videos, real reps, real bodies moving around each other, real hints of what this Raiders team might actually become. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've got this team penciled in for a Super Bowl run or even a division title, because that would be dishonest and honestly a little delusional given where this franchise has been. But I will say this with full confidence. What I saw today told me this version of the Raiders has a real shot at being noticeably better than the group we watched fall apart last year. And yeah, I know I said something similar 12 months ago and we all remember how that turned out, so I'm choosing my optimism carefully this time. Cautiously excited, that's where I'm at. Let's start where everybody's mind immediately goes, because it's the story that's going to define this entire season before a single snap counts in the regular year. The quarterback room. Heading into today, the writing was already on the wall. Coach Kubiak had made it clear in yesterday's press availability that Kirk Cousins was going to walk out there as the guy running the first-team offense. And that's exactly how it played out. Cousins took every rep you'd expect from a starter, threw the ball with the kind of rhythm you'd hope for from a veteran who's seen basically everything the league can throw at him, and then stood in front of the media afterward like a man who has done this exact routine 100 times before, because he has. But here's what got my attention. Right behind him, taking second-team reps, was Fernando Mendoza, the rookie the front office traded up to secure. The guy half of Raider Nation has already mentally installed as the franchise quarterback of the future. And from what I saw and what's being reported out of that first practice, he didn't look like a kid who was overwhelmed by the moment. He looked composed, comfortable even. I'm telling you right now, I cannot wait until the pads go on, because that's when we actually get to see if this rookie has the physical tools to match the mental poise he's flashing right now. Now, when reporters pushed Cousins on how it feels being named QB1 out of the gate, he didn't take the bait to sound cocky or entitled about it. Instead, his answer leaned into something you hear from guys who've been humbled by this league before. The idea that nothing is guaranteed here, that your standing is only as strong as your last rep, your last read, your last throw, and that you have to go earn your spot fresh every single day rather than assume it's yours because of a depth chart printout. And look, I respect that. That's who Cousins has always been as a competitor. Measured, professional, careful with his words. But don't let that calm exterior fool you. Underneath that veteran poise is still a guy who wants to win the job and keep it, not just hold a seat warm for the kid behind him. And that's the part of this quarterback room that genuinely excites me, because it's not just Cousins and Mendoza in that room. Aiden O'Connell is still very much a part of this equation too. Three guys, three very different paths to get there, all sharing meeting rooms and walkthroughs and practice reps together. And from the outside, it looks friendly. It looks cooperative. Guys laughing together, pushing each other. No visible tension. But make no mistake about what's actually happening underneath all that camaraderie. This is a legitimate competition, and every single one of them knows it. Nobody in that quarterback room is under any illusion that friendliness means the job is settled. What makes it work, though, is that all three of them seem to genuinely want the best player under center, regardless of ego. Cousins isn't clinging to the job just because he got the free agent contract this offseason. Mendoza isn't demanding reps just because he was the headline pick. And O'Connell isn't sitting there sulking because, let's be honest, most of Raider Nation has already made peace with the fact that he's probably not going to be the long-term answer. Instead, what I'm hearing, and what Cousins himself touched on when asked directly about working alongside these two, is a room built on mutual accountability. The idea of constantly asking each other sharp questions, pushing one another to be better, and treating the competition itself as something that should be enjoyable rather than something to dread. Cousins framed it as raising the collective standard, not just fighting for a title. And that phrase, raising the standard, hit different for me, because if there's one position this franchise has genuinely struggled to get right for years, it's this exact one. We've watched this organization cycle through veteran bridge quarterbacks on one-year deals just to see what they had, only to end up right back at square one every single offseason. It's been a graveyard of temporary answers, but for the first time in a long time, I'm looking at this quarterback room, and I don't just see a stopgap. I see a legitimate starter in Cousins, who still has plenty left in the tank, and I see a genuine long-term investment in Mendoza sitting right behind him, learning, absorbing, waiting for his window. That's not a room built on desperation anymore. That's a room built with intention. Speaking of Mendoza specifically, I want to be honest about where my expectations sit for him this season, because I think it's important not to get ahead of ourselves here. I don't think this kid needs to see the field this year unless something extraordinary happens between now and week 1. Like an absolute takeover of camp and preseason that makes it impossible for the coaching staff to keep him off the field. Outside of that scenario, I actually think the best thing for his development is exactly what's happening right now. Sitting, watching, absorbing everything from the sideline, and letting the moment come to him naturally instead of forcing it. There's no rush here. The long-term plan already has him positioned perfectly. And it sounds like the coaching staff agrees, because offensive coordinator Andrew Jeanty had some genuinely encouraging things to say about Mendoza's growth since OTAs. The gist of it was that Mendoza has taken real ownership of the offense, that he's not just memorizing plays anymore, he's actually starting to command the huddle, translate what he sees on film and in the meeting room out onto the actual grass, and sync his footwork to the picture he's reading in real time. That's not something you say about a guy who's overwhelmed. That's coach speak for a rookie who's ahead of schedule mentally, even if the physical grind of an NFL season is still an unknown variable. Put it all together, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm not sitting here anxious about who's lining up under center for this team. I trust this room. I trust the plan. Whoever ends up out there week 1, I believe the Raiders are in capable hands. That alone is a massive shift from where we've been mentally as a fan base the last several years. Now let's talk about the guy who genuinely might have been the emotional headline of the entire day. Maxx Crosby. We already knew going in, thanks to Kubiak's comments yesterday, that Crosby was cleared to be a full participant in practice. But hearing it and actually watching it happen are two completely different things. And when that man stepped onto the field today, it didn't look like somebody easing back in. It looked like Maxx Crosby, full stop. Explosive off the line on essentially every rep, moving like a guy who hadn't lost a single step, like the injury that kept him sidelined never happened at all. And when he spoke to the media afterward, he was refreshingly honest about what that moment actually meant to him. He talked about how this was really the first time he'd gone full speed since December of last year, and how there were a handful of reps out there where he could feel himself hesitate for just a split second. That mental flicker of self-preservation your brain throws at you after an injury, even when your body is fully ready to go. But physically, he said there was no hesitation at all. Just pure instinct, flying around, moving like himself again. And he was quick to credit the people around him, the trainers, the staff, everyone who put in the work behind the scenes to get him back to this point, while making it clear he's still approaching this recovery one day at a time rather than getting ahead of himself. Honestly, hearing him talk about just being grateful to be back out there with his teammates again, that hit me harder than I expected it to. This is a guy who lives and breathes this sport, and you could tell in his voice how much that day actually meant to him beyond just football logistics. But here's the part of the story that I think is genuinely fascinating and maybe even a little bit concerning if I'm being real with you. Crosby doesn't know how to go half speed. That's just not in his DNA. And apparently the coaching staff has already had to step in and specifically tell him to pump the brakes a little bit in practice, that he doesn't need to be going full send on every single rep of a training camp session in July. Crosby's response to that was almost funny in how honestly he described it. He basically admitted that he's had multiple people, coaches, staff, teammates, pull him aside individually just to remind him about the unwritten rulebook of training camp etiquette. Things like not going full contact on the quarterbacks, knowing where the invisible lines are. And he flat out admitted that he knows he pushes those lines and sometimes crosses them completely, not out of disrespect, but because of who he fundamentally is as a competitor. He wants to be the best at what he does, and more than that, he wants to drag his teammates up to that same standard alongside him. Once the bullets start flying, so to speak, he said it's just not in his nature to hold back or think about not finishing a play. That's been the story of his entire career, and he was honest enough to admit it's not something that's easy to just switch off. I get both sides of this tension completely. The coaching staff has to protect their investment. They can't afford to have their franchise quarterback taking unnecessary hits from their own all-pro pass rusher in a meaningless July practice. But at the same time, you cannot manufacture that kind of relentless motor. You can't coach that level of internal fire into a player. Crosby either has it or he doesn't, and he clearly has it in a way that borders on uncontrollable. My hope is that he finds a way to dial it back just enough to stay healthy through camp, because I genuinely don't think the coaching staff fully grasps who they're dealing with here. This is a guy who doesn't know how to fake intensity. It's all real, all the time. Sharing the field with Crosby for the very first time this year was another name Raider Nation has been buzzing about since free agency opened, Nakobe Dean. A lot of people have been asking where he's been, why we hadn't heard much, and today gave us our first real look at him in silver and black. Just seeing him and Crosby out there together on the same defense, even in a non-padded walkthrough setting, was enough to get my imagination running about what this front seven could actually look like once the season kicks into gear. Worth noting, Dean was wearing a leg sleeve out there, which suggests he might still be managing some lingering effects from the injury that ended his year prematurely last season. Nothing alarming necessarily, but definitely something worth tracking as camp progresses. Shifting over to the offensive side of the ball, I want to talk about Jeanty because heading into his second season, it sounds like he's already stepping into a completely different role within this locker room. According to Jeanty has started taking on a genuine leadership presence, showing up with that same relentless enthusiasm every single day, and the staff is clearly excited about what that energy brings to the room. The plan from the coaching side is to keep building on his natural strengths through deliberate, focused coaching on every single rep, putting him in the best possible position to succeed as this offense evolves around him. That's exactly the kind of report you want to hear, honestly, because this team is going to need leadership at every level if it wants to take a real step forward. And for a guy who was drafted in the top 10 last year specifically to be the centerpiece of this backfield, there is an enormous amount of pressure riding on his shoulders heading into year 2. I've got sky-high expectations for him this season, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think the entire fan base is expecting a legitimate leap. But Jeanty isn't operating in a vacuum back there. He's got a running mate pushing him too, and reports out of today's session had this second year back taking snaps with both the first and second team units, a pretty clear signal of how much trust the coaching staff already has in him. Being a day 3 pick, he's been vocal on his own platform about wanting to put the entire league on notice this year, and even though he's technically ticketed as the number 2 option in the backfield right now, there's absolutely nothing stopping him from carving out a legitimate role once real games start counting. And with Kubiak bringing that ground and pound offensive identity to Las Vegas, I fully expect both of these backs to see real volume together in the same backfield at different points throughout the season. If they both live up to what's being expected of them, this could genuinely turn into one of the more dangerous backfield duos in the conference. A few more storylines worth flagging from day 1 before I wrap this up. Running back Jamal Williams-McCoy got run with the second and third team groups during team drills, which is a solid early sign that he's starting to climb his way up the depth chart. Definitely someone worth keeping tabs on as camp rolls forward. On the defensive side, there's a rookie name buzzing through the building that I think deserves more attention than it's currently getting. Zeke Masters, the corner out of Cal. He earned first-team reps today lined up opposite Eric Stokes, which is not a small thing for a rookie defensive back this early in camp. From what I'm hearing through various channels, this is a name people around the building are genuinely excited about. I'll be watching him closely for the rest of camp and through preseason, because early signs like this one tend to matter. And up front on the offensive line, it looks like continuity is the name of the game so far. The starting group is running things back essentially unchanged from OTAs. Colton Miller anchoring the left tackle spot, Spencer Burford, Tyler Linderbaum in the middle, along with JPJ and DJ Glaze rounding things out. Now, is this the exact group we'll see trotting out there week 1? Too early to say for certain, but it's the current picture. And honestly, outside of the quarterback position itself, I don't think there's a more important storyline to track all camp long than whether this offensive line can hold its chemistry together and stay healthy through a full 16-plus game grind. So that's day 1 in the books. First real look at this roster together, and I walked away with a genuinely different feeling than I've had in years past watching this franchise open camp. It's just one more step closer to real football, one more piece of the puzzle coming into focus before we find out what this version of the Raiders is actually capable of. I'm bracing myself, honestly, because I have a feeling this season is going to put us through the emotional ringer one way or another. I just hope this time it's the kind of roller coaster that ends with us smiling instead of the kind we've gotten used to the last few years. What did you take away from day 1? Which storyline has you the most locked in heading into the rest of camp? The quarterback competition, Crosby's return, or that backfield duo? Drop your thoughts, because I want to hear where Raider Nation's head is at right now.